Hello viewers. Today we are going to continue in our two-part series about the tools used when doing a major car restoration. Enjoy!
What I'm showing here is PP, personal protection devices. They're self-explanatory. Protect your hearing, protect what you're breathing, protect your hands, and protect your eyesight from using this to a face shield to glasses. Just always have something over your eyes, because when you're doing body work, i.e. like removing rusty panels or grinding welds and that type of stuff, you've got metal particles and things flying around in the air at breakneck speed. Just always have something on your eyes. Your hands, you know, what can I say? You got to protect your hands, especially when you're cutting materials, using any of the pneumatic tools, because boy, if you get any pneumatic tool is going to cut through your skin like butter. So make sure you have protection. The breathing protection, certainly use it. You're grinding metal and all that dust is getting in the air, plus the abrasive materials on the discs that you're using, that is getting in the air, and you just don't want that in your lungs. So protect your lungs. I find I use this quite a bit because it's got two of them built in, right? And I actually got this for sandblasting, but find that I use it all the time because it's just as easy to throw this on my head versus this and a set of glasses or a face shield. It's just all in one. Look into something like this. They're terrific. What can I say? Use protection. The next set of tools that I've kind of grouped together here, I'm trying to find some intelligent way of grouping them. This I would put into the cutting category. You got, of course, your reciprocating saw. This is good for big cuts, like on the MG, maybe cutting through the whole rocker assembly so you can pull it out, that type of thing. But it's brutal, you know. That's for a beefy job, so beware. You've got a lesser version of that, your typical hacksaw for cutting in areas. Sometimes there's just these little cuts you need to make that are in these hard places to get to. So that's where a hacksaw blade can come in, actually using it without a handle so you can get right in there to tight spaces. This guy is called a nibbler. I don't use it that much. I guess you can get different grades and powers and costs, that type of thing. And it literally just nibbles away sheet metal. But they're good because you can cut paths with it, curved paths with it. But we're going to talk about the good old angle grinder with a cutting disc in a second here. Kind of makes this thing a little bit obsolete. Plus, this leaves behind these little crescent moon shaped shards of metal that go everywhere. So you have to be aware of containment on these pieces, because they get everywhere, and they hurt. Here we've got chisels. Typically not used for cutting, although you can, whether by hand or pneumatic. It will plow through the sheet metal on a vehicle with ease. Typically these are used for breaking rivets, so you will use these, but just beware, be careful, because they have a lot of power that you can't really control. And when you're breaking panels apart on the older MGs, well, they're all old now, but when you're breaking panels apart along, thin half-inch flanges, these can tear up both sides of that flange. So just use at your own caution, but they work.
Hi there. John, and I hope you are finding this information useful.
Talking about rivets remind me of this guy. This one you'll actually use, well, I don't know, you're gonna do what you're gonna do. But this one is just a manual version of this for chiseling. But this guy, again, it's got the blade, so to speak, on 3 sides, and you can get this in between 2 panels, and then you just bang on it with a hammer or mallet to break rivets. Much more controllable. Doesn't do near the damage that this guy can do if it kind of gets away from you. So highly recommended tool for ripping seams along spot welds. This guy, wasn't quite sure where to put it. I put it in the category of cutting because it does 2 things, and everything that I'm showing you is available at Harbor Freight or Amazon. There's nothing gee whiz to anything. Even the Clecos I showed you, that you can buy those on Amazon. So I put this in cutting because it does 2 things. It can bend a flange, which I'll demonstrate in a second, which can be helpful, but it also can punch holes. And you can get these in different diameters. Just be aware that the quote recommended diameter for holes that are going to be used for plug welds is in the 5/16 diameter region. And this thing, you can get them in that size, but the cost goes up exponentially. So typically they'll come in less than that. Just beware of that. But they do a great job. They punch a hole in seconds. Again, we'll demo that in a second. So the first one we'll demonstrate here is the punch, which is this guy. Just put it on your metal and pull the trigger and you got a hole. And you can do this all day and it's excellent. But as I mentioned, I forget the diameter. It's not a 1/4 inch. I think it's a little less than a 1/4 inch, which is too small for the recommended size of plug welds. So just be aware of that. But again, you can buy these with bigger diameters. But you gotta take into account the thickness of the metal. The bigger size diameters usually lower the thickness of metal you can go through. So like if you're doing ducting, AC duct work, that type of stuff with a much lesser gauge or higher number gauge metal, the bigger ones can punch through that better. But in the gauges that we're working on with vehicles, which is in the 20 down to 16 gauge, you gotta be cognizant of what the max cutting depth is of that. The next thing we do is we'll just flip this over and make a flange. So you just do this and just work your way along the piece. Go back. Make sure it's done. And what it's creating is we call it a joggle in the aero industry. But let me get the camera out. Creating a jog in the metal here, or an offset flange, which is great because you can then take your second piece of sheet metal, which when you put your other piece up against it, now you have a constant flat thickness across this face. Okay, you're recessing the metals so that they come out being parallel. So that's where you would use that tool. Let's move on. So these next guys are still in the category of cutting, although of course a type of angle grinder you can put different heads on, but by far, at least I have found that this is the tool you use 90% of the time when you're working on these old restorations. With a cutting disc, you can just plow through these gauges of metal, say 18 gauge material. You can control the cut to make straight lines, or you can follow curvature within reason. Does a great job. You will use this all the time. This is just a variant of that with a broken disc. Ironically, for some reason, I just don't use it as much as I use this one. It's just so easy to grab this, and this one's supposedly better at small areas, but I don't have a problem with this one. What I want to point out here, and I have the disclaimer on the intro, but this bad boy comes with these, and it's a guard, a shroud, and use or remove at your own risk. I have found that it can get in the way when you're trying to make a cut, because you can't see from this direction, you got to flip it to this direction, and although this is adjustable, right, you can spin it around. That's why it's got this. It's just really nice not having it on. Let's just leave it that way.
Hey viewers, wake up. There's still plenty of good stuff coming.
So I'm just going to say I'm removing that for demonstration purposes only, and I use it all of the time. All right, so that's the shroud. If you choose to not have the shroud on, and certainly in all cases when you're working with metal, grinding, or cutting, you certainly have to have eye protection, and you should have breathing protection, some type of air filter. So that goes without saying either way. And if you're gonna live dangerously and not use your shroud here, you better have some pretty beefy gloves like these, because if this thing breaks, which they can do because they're just thin, that thing will slice into you. And if you don't have some good padding around your knuckles, it's going to be a bad day. So that's why you have these. They really do cut down the danger factor. So we've discussed the angle grinder with the cutting discs in. There's a new one. I use this more than anything. When you're doing these old MGBs, you're constantly cutting old stuff out to make room for the new. And then of course you're cutting the new pieces out of the flat stock plate. And again, it's perfect for that. It's fast. Does a great job, pretty clean cut. You just have to maybe remove some burrs along the edge. That one you use all the time. This guy is an interesting one. It's called a Deburring cutter. They're very cheap. You can get these things like 20 bucks, I think, Harbor Freight. And the bits are also pretty cheap. And these do a great job at aggressive metal removal, which, if you're not an expert welder, you are always aggressively trying to remove all those crappy welds you just made. So these are perfect for that. You got all the different tip shapes and sizes to get in nooks and crannies. These things work fast. However, they create nasty little shards of metal that go everywhere. So of course, all types of protection should be worn, certainly eyes, gloves, that type of thing. But those little shards of metal get everywhere, including inside your gloves, inside your shoes, your socks, and you will get metal splinters. When you least expect it, all of a sudden you're going to take your glove off to see that you have a splinter somewhere in your finger. And they're little bitty metal splinters. So a great tool for removing metal aggressively, but take precautions to seal your body from the shards of metal that this thing creates. The last set of tools to discuss are your abrasives and sanding tools. Of course, you got your Old Faithful, which you can place any of these guys in, and these are laid down in rank of aggressiveness at metal removal. So we'll discuss that a little bit. And then you've just got smaller variations of that. That's a 2-inch disc. This is a 3-inch, depending on what you're doing. And that's just the different version of this, so to speak. So the one thing you're going to be doing is aggressively trying to remove metal. Again, typically from welds that you've made, you got to flatten them out. So you've got your different aggressiveness. Very aggressive, you can get these 30 grit, 80 grit, whatever you want. Then you've got these discs, not quite as aggressive, but these would be next in rank. Then you've got flapper discs, and you can get these in different grades too. They're nicer than these guys. They leave a smoother finish. Even at a lower grit, they will leave a nicer finish than these guys will. Then this guy is the best thing ever. You can get these in different colors, which is different grits, but these are the best thing ever for removing paint or just rust, surface rust, prepping it for welding, whatever it is you're doing. These are great. I highly recommend you use these. They don't quote, remove material aggressively like these guys do, but they'll take off any surface finish you've got in a far less aggressive way. So if you haven't used these before, use them. Then what do we got down here? These guys and this guy is good for getting in tighter places than any of these. And these come in a myriad of grits and then working your way to this. These are more for the finishing work after the fact, although you can use them however you want. But typically they're for, let's just say, the finish metal work of getting the metal prepped for painting or bondo work, whatever it is you're doing. That's what these guys typically are used for. Here's another guy in your arsenal of sanders. I have mixed emotions on this thing, and they make a longer version also and a wider version. But I cheaped out and got the $40. I don't know, I can't remember what it cost. Not too bad. The other ones get a little bit more expensive quickly. But I find, although it's great for getting into tight places, and it's great for grinding down, I should say, spot welds in a very controlled location, that I just find that these belts, they break so easy, and they also wear out very quickly. Now that's my findings, how I've been using the tool. The one tip I can tell you to maybe extend the length of the belt and not have it break on you is to just very lightly touch the surface you're trying to grind down. Because if you dig in any way, it just tears the belt at the seam. It's got a little tape seam on it, and it'll just break right there. So use at your own expense, literally. So I almost left these out. There's your typical wire brushes, wire wheels in different aggressiveness. Again, great for removing finishes, but nowhere near as good as this. So again, use these as you will. The different shapes on these allow you to get into maybe some tighter areas with these little guys that you can't get to with something this big. But for bigger areas that aren't confined, this is absolutely your best bet for removing paint, removing rust, that type of stuff. But wire brushes. Just one last comment. Depending on the surface roughness, like if you've got some very pitted metal that you're trying to remove the rust and stuff, that's when you're going to need or find out that these guys are better, because again, they deform to go into little nooks and crannies on the surface of the metal. So that's where you would use these to benefit. This guy, since it's a flat area, will polish everything around the pit, but you can't get in the pit with these. So that's when you would use a wire brush.